Welcome to meeting number 110 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Before we begin, I would ask that all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. You will also notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video, which obviously I don't want you to watch at the present time, so I don't know where it's come from. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I would like to remind all members of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. For those participating by video conference, and I think we might have some on the next panel, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. And thank you all for your cooperation. Before we move into the formal portion of the meeting, I just wanted to give you an update on our witness requests. We now have confirmation from both of our ministers that they will be appearing shortly after the winter break. I think in the second week. Minister Champagne has confirmed the second week. Just a moment, please let me finish. And Minister Holland said in the new year. As we know, our dates of our meeting will probably change, so we don't know the exact date, but that's the commitment. Mr. Tucker, you had a...
Yes, I don't think that's acceptable for the committee. We've given them how many weeks already, and what it's holding up is this committee's ability to do our work. The Liberals are hiding ministers from this committee to answer questions that we need answers to. And it's not acceptable that they're going to take the winter off and come back in the spring and present those answers. We need answers today for Canadians. I believe this is a stalling tactic that is being deployed here. And I'm going to be very interested to hear the rest of the members' views on this tactic.
Mr. Longfield, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, sure. I don't know which mic. I'll be on mic 6. I think, given the season that we're in with supplementary estimates, it's thank you to the clerk and to the chair for finding some time in the minister's schedule once we're through estimates and the other things that are drawing him into other committees. It's unfortunate we can't see him sooner, but at least we know what we're dealing with now. So thanks for the update.
Okay, so were there any other comments? That seems to be the first available date. I do know the minister is anxious to come, but he is, as you indicated, called before other committees as well. And as we all know, we're running out of actual dates. Yes, Mr. Kitchen, MP Kitchen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, and I apologize to the speaker guy touched the mic. I apologize. I have a question. Here we're dealing with where we've asked the ministers to come, continually asking them to show, such that we can hear about what's going on. The excuse has always been that, well, capstone hasn't been determined yet, and here we're needing to find out input from the minister so that the minister can actually respond back to capstone, and that's the purpose of the discussions, is such that the minister can hear from witnesses and from us on issues about capstone, and yet the minister's going to wait until the new year to come back and speak to us. That's not acceptable. The minister shouldn't be speaking to us. We should be speaking to the minister. And the fact that the ministers are saying they're not coming till such a date, and we don't even know when that date is because, A, we don't have a time frame as to when our meetings will be, whether they'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, who knows. But the reality is that we have ministers that should be here because and they're delaying the aspect such that we can deal with this, which then says that they've already prearranged what Capstone is about, which is not acceptable to this committee. It's very upsetting to hear that where we're supposed to be having input into this and we're not getting any whatsoever, Madam Chair.
Minister Champagne has confirmed the week of February the 3rd. As you know, the dates for committees change after a break. So we don't know what days of the week we'll be meeting, but he has confirmed that he will attend that week. That's his first availability. He is attending other committees in the meantime.
Madam Chair, February 3rd is a date. And if all of a sudden we
That's
don't know.
a week of.
Oh, so he has nothing else during that week to all of a sudden the minister is a minister at that level all of a sudden can say, I've got a whole week off after we come back to the House? How's that acceptable?
He's slotted that he'll make himself available during our committee meetings that week. We will have 2 committee meetings, presumably.
And what if the minister gets called away and is sent off somewhere else? How are we to then deal with it then? We'll get another excuse for, I can't make it?
Point of order.
Yes.
We have witnesses in the room. Could we
Yes.
move to witnesses, please?
Yes. Can I have agreement around the table that we'll proceed with our witnesses? Thank you. We will proceed with our meeting then as scheduled. I'm sorry, one comment quickly.
Madame la Présidente, juste savoir.
I'd just like to confirm with the clerk, have the other dates been proposed to the 2 ministers, the 28th of November, the 3rd or 5th of December, the 10th and the 12th of December, and even the 17th, and perhaps even maybe on December 19th?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you said because I didn't have the translation, but I can say we offered all those dates, and this is the answer we got back. So now I'm going to proceed with our witnesses that have been patiently waiting. Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, 3I, and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, the committee resumes its study on the mission, mandate, role, structure, and financing of the new Capstone Research Funding Organization announced in Budget 2024. It is now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Health, Michelle Boudreau, Associate Deputy Minister, Health Policy Branch, and from the Department of Industry, Nipun Vats, Assistant Deputy Minister, Science and Research Sector. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we'll proceed with rounds of questions. Mr. Vats, I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for the invitation. I'm here on the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people today to discuss the Capstone Research Funding Organization as a central element of the government's plan to modernize the research support system. En tant que sous-ministre adjoint du secteur des sciences.
As Assistant Deputy Minister for the Science and Research Sector at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, I'm responsible for policy and programs related to federal funding of post-secondary research.
The ISED portfolio supports researchers through 2 of the 3 federal granting councils, as you know, NSERC and SHRC. The 3rd granting council, Canadian Institutes of Health Research, falls within the health portfolio, and my colleague will be speaking to that today as well. Together, these councils form the backbone of the federal research support system we know today, alongside the Canada Foundation for Innovation, which funds research infrastructure. Les conseils subventionnaires ont très bien réussi à remplir.
The granting councils have been highly successful at delivering on their mandates and supporting social, technological, and public health advancements. However, the challenges we face today are far more complex and interconnected than those encountered when these structures were first established.
Increasingly working across disciplines, sectors, and borders to address multifaceted issues such as public health crises and environmental sustainability. But the fragmentation of the system limits support for cross-cutting solutions and hinders the coordination necessary to fully address these challenges. This was recognized by the advisory panel on the federal research support system, which was convened to gather independent expert advice on the structure and governance of the federal system supporting research and talent, and how to position research investments for greatest impact. Among the panel's recommendations was the creation of a new structure to improve coordination, collaboration, and agility, enhance strategic direction, and modernize research support. The capstone is a direct reflection of these objectives and a commitment to strengthen and build a more resilient research ecosystem. The capstone would integrate the 3 federal granting councils within a single federal research funding organization, establishing CIHR, NSERC, and SHRC as constituent research councils. The capstone would be more than just an umbrella organization over 3 separate councils. It would also provide a unified governance structure to foster coordination and collaboration across disciplines. It would be led by a single board of directors with diverse representation who would provide strategic governance and a CEO responsible for day-to-day operations. This governance would drive coordination across the organization, enhancing support for cross-cutting disciplinary and multi-sectoral research and partnerships within and outside of Canada, while preserving the discipline-specific leadership that the granting councils currently provide. It would also maintain vital linkages with the Canada Foundation for Innovation, given the links between research and research infrastructure, and ensure the organization plays an active role within the broader science ecosystem. Un objectif clé de cette nouvelle structure.
A key objective of this new structure is to support all types of research and researchers. This includes investigator-driven research, which is essential for generating foundational knowledge through new ideas, theories, and insights, research that can provide practical solutions to specific societal challenges, and research that is more strategic or applied, where findings can be translated into applications. The capstone would aim to help bridge the gaps between these types of research and between disciplines and sectors in order to effectively tackle national and global challenges, drive innovation, and improve the quality of life of the people of Canada.
Academic freedom would remain a foundational principle of the capstone, ensuring that research is funded based on internationally accepted standards of scientific excellence and ethics and peer and merit review. The capstone would also continue to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in research, ensuring that researchers from equity-seeking groups have equal opportunities to access funding. This includes strengthening research capacity for Indigenous researchers and communities and fostering a more inclusive understanding of the world through Indigenous ways of knowing, as well as continuing to support French language research to ensure Francophone communities can equally contribute to and benefit from scientific advancements. L'organisation cadre améliorerait la réputation scientifique.
The capstone would enhance Canada's global scientific reputation through improved coordination and collaboration and by further incorporating diverse perspectives that are crucial for effectively addressing complex and societal challenges.
Including the advisory panel for their valuable contributions so far, as well as to the committee for its deliberations. Ongoing dialogue will ensure the capstone meets the community's needs and serves the broader interests of the country. I thank you for your time and your important work, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
We'll now turn to Ms. Boudreau. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the invitation to be here today. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. My name is Michelle Boudreau. As you already know, I'm the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Health Policy Branch at Health Canada, and I work very closely with my colleague at ISED, Nippon, whom you just heard from. I will not revisit the topics that my colleague has covered in his statement, and I'll take instead a few minutes to speak about health research and its importance to the health of Canadians. Health research creates the scientific evidence and knowledge needed to support the health and wellness of people in Canada. It is vital for decision makers at all levels of government. Health research also helps health professionals, policymakers, health system administrators, and others make informed decisions. Canada has a strong health research community with research in universities, colleges and polytechnics, in hospitals and affiliated research institutes, and in government and private sector research facilities as well. The Canadian Institute of Health Research, CIHR, has also been central to the development of Canada's vibrant health research community. Health research and innovations are constantly changing to address the complex and emerging issues impacting people's health. Research has needed to become increasingly collaborative in response. This is where the Capstone organization will play a vital role. Moving forward, we anticipate that the Capstone's objective to maximize the impact of research by increasing collaboration and by better supporting research that crosses disciplines and sectors will have great benefits for health for all Canadians. I'll just note here for the purposes of translation that I will make the rest of my remarks in French. Réunir la santé, les sciences sociales.
Bringing together health, social, and natural sciences will create opportunities to address disparities that affect the health and wellness of Black and racialized people, people with disabilities, LGBTQI+2 people, and other communities. We also see an opportunity to advance reconciliation by fostering collaboration and co-development with Aboriginal communities, organizations, and academics to address disparities affecting the health and wellness of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We have heard from the research community that maintaining strong links between Capstone, CIHR, the Minister of Health, and other health partners will be critical to the success of Capstone. We remain committed to maintaining these links. These links will also be essential to ensure that emerging health issues are brought to the fore, that research evidence informs health policies, programs, and regulations, and that health research is integrated into strategic initiatives. For Health Canada in particular, our deep and enduring links with CIHR, and through them with the health research community, enable us to apply research evidence to our work. Through our collaboration with CIHR, we are also able to help the Canadian health research community better understand the critical issues and questions facing health policymakers, resulting in more focused advice and more effective health research. I'll conclude my remarks on this point and note that my colleague, Dr. Clifford, who is the acting president of CIHR, will also be appearing later today and will be in a position to elaborate on the health research community's feedback on the umbrella organization. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Boudreau. We'll now start our members' questions. Open the floor. Be sure to indicate to whom your questions are directed. We'll start with MP Viersen for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, want to just voice my concerns around the minister not appearing this fall yet. I think we made ourselves fairly clear about that, and it is incredibly frustrating. However, I would note that Mr. Vats has answered a bunch of the questions that we were wondering about. So I had a number of questions prepared here just around the whether we would be melting the tri-councils into the new Capstone Association. I think you referred to the fact that you will be. That will be a pulling together of that. And we've also noted a number of studies that are having money sent abroad to the United States, to other countries. We heard from witnesses who talked about how the Americans are putting crazy amounts of money into research. How do you think that the Capstone will manage the more targeted funding for research, but also looking around the world and seeing like what is in Canada's interest? How do we focus for Canadians to get these research dollars, maximizing Canada's place in the world, I suppose?
Well, maybe I'll first just maybe clarify your first comment, which is about sort of the melting together or the melding of the councils. What we're trying to do is drive integration, but still draw on the expertise of those domain-specific councils. So you know the natural science and engineering expertise or the health expertise. Sometimes you need to bring those together to address an issue like the pandemic, for example, where you need to bring disciplines together. And that's going to be the role of the Capstone. It will have an overall kind of governance responsibility for the organization as a whole, but that's not to minimize the importance of the domain-specific research areas that feed into that. With respect to the international positioning, I think one of the things that the Bouchard report highlighted and was also true in the consultations that came forward is that Canada does really well in terms of researcher-initiated international collaboration, but it's not necessarily kind of thought of from the strategic interests of the country as a whole. And that's natural for a researcher. A researcher is going to find the best people to work with anywhere in the world to advance knowledge, so long as it kind of adheres to some important principles around, in our case, research security or the research integrity kind of elements. But individual researchers alone are not going to necessarily be able to say, collectively, we have certain capabilities to bring to the table, and we want to work with our trusted partners to advance collaboration and research that can lead to economic benefits or greater security benefits for the country. And that's something that, or societal benefits, that could be big challenges internationally that we want to work on together. And that's a bit of the role of the capstone as well, is to kind of bring that kind of coherent, coordinated voice to those international collaborations that maybe is there, but is a bit more diffuse the way that the system is now.
And that's, I think, what we've been hearing from the witnesses. That's what the dream of the capstone. But how do we make sure that this isn't just a renaming exercise? We just smush it together. Instead of 3 councils, we have 1, and it's just essentially a renaming exercise. What specifically do you think that's going to be different than what we currently have? Well,
I think there are a few layers to that. So the first one is it'll have a governance board, right, which will bring the perspectives of the research community, of industry, of civil society around providing strategic direction to the organization. It'll be informed by government directions, but there's a degree of independence in terms of how you fund research to make sure that.
But presumably, most of that is already happening. Like the councils are governance boards.
The councils, it varies by council, but the way that the councils are structured now, the council per se.
Yeah.
In the case of NSERC and SHIRC, and my colleagues here can speak this a bit more, they play an important advisory function, but they don't have a true governance function for the organization. And so there's a bit of a shift in terms of the way that an organization is governed with kind of that strategic oversight.
Okay, so who's providing governance at this point?
So the presidents are accountable to the minister for that. And they do draw on the expertise in the research community, but it's not formalized in the same way except for the councils, which again are valuable, but serve more of an advisory function, more of a governance function with respect to CIHR. It's a little bit different. But the other thing I would say is that the idea is that the CEO of the new organization would carry the voice of the Canadian research community. Now, the way that it works right now is it is very effective in terms of certain kinds of. I'm sorry.
Say a dedicated rather than the health minister, or is that what?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't replace like the political dialogue that can help to pave the way for important kind of collaborations. But what it is that when you get down another level, what often happens, because we have such a rich research ecosystem, is if you go to an international meeting, you'll have 12 Canadians on one side, and you'll have maybe 2 or 3 people on the other side, because again, we've organically developed this great research ecosystem. But when you want to speak as a collective, it's a little harder to do. And so part of what this would do is enable that more kind of single window coherent voice on those larger scale kinds of research initiatives. There'd still be a role for the political level in paving the way for some of that, but the idea would be to bring some more focus to those initiatives at the kind of research level.
Very much for that. So we'll now turn to MP Diab for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to wish the witnesses a good afternoon. I do understand that you are all from Nova Scotia. I, too, am an MP. Mike Calloway comes from Nova Scotia as well, so welcome here this afternoon, and I'm happy that both of you are bilingual. So hats off. Ms. Boudreau, I have a question for you. I understand.
And, your work relates predominantly to pharmacare, mental health and substance abuse policies, or a combination thereof. So can you speak to the importance of maintaining or even enhancing the linkages between the health research and Health Canada under Capstone as it relates to those important issues?
Sure, certainly, and thank you for the kind invitation. Vraiment, je suis une Acadienne très fière de l'Acadie.
Yes, I'm a proud Acadian.
Thanks for that. Absolutely, maintaining that link with CIHR is critical for Health Canada. And I can tell you just from, as you mentioned, the areas where I work, one of the first things we do as policy makers and looking at initiatives is think about what is the research component. Are there specific research elements that we would want to be part of the initiative? For example, the National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Diseases. There's a strong component there that has to do with research, and we have CIHR leading that. In mental health and substance use, one of the things that we have been putting forward is IYS, Integrated Youth Services, and hubs, and again, a very strong link with CIHR and the work that they have done through their networks of networks. So it's almost instinctive for us at Health Canada that as we start to develop these strategic initiatives, we think about what is the research component and where can CIHR help us with that.
So thanks for providing those examples. I just find sometimes it makes it easier for us to really understand sort of and make some kind of and the linkages between all of that when we use specific examples. What would you say are the top considerations to make the capstone successful?
Well, I think I would answer that question by perhaps playing back to you some of what's in the What We Heard report and some of what researchers themselves have told us. So my colleague Nippon mentioned, I think, a few of them in his opening remarks. Certainly, the independence of the research, that it be merit-based, that there still be room for investigator-led research, that there continue to be focus on equity deserving groups and looking at health equity, that there be increased importance and continued importance on Indigenous health and Indigenous issues, and to look at addressing those disparities that exist. And then finally, I just maybe a couple of things to close on that. Making sure that the link between CIHR and the health portfolio and the health partners and the Minister of Health remains is critical. Ensuring that some of what's in the CIHR Act currently remains and some of the governance. In other words, the successes that CIHR has brought continues. That will be critical as we move forward with Capstone.
Okay. Dr. Vatz, you work with investments in post-secondary research, among other things. What impact do you see Capstone having on that process, and what would be the top considerations in your opinion?
Well, I think the starting point is to say that you want to ensure that the basic research enterprise isn't compromised through the creation of Capstone, because there's still a need for that that the ideas, the talent that's developed through kind of the core research funding enterprise. But with respect to some of the activities of the Capstone, some of them may just be about better coordinating activities that are already underway within the councils and beyond the councils. I should say it's important to connect. We have a very broad research ecosystem, so can we pull that community together more effectively when we're talking international or mission-oriented work? I think there would also need to be, and this is something that would follow, so it wouldn't be a day one thing, but thinking more about how you can better engage the consumers of research in how you define things like mission-oriented research. So talking more actively with industry, for example, about how you can meet their needs through the research enterprise. Talking more with community groups when it comes to issues that are research related that are going to impact communities directly, and having that be the way that you kind of shape the larger scale initiatives that would come forward through the Capstone. So I think that's a really important part of constructing something that's going to have real impact.
Where are we now with developing the governance structure? Or is this part of what we're doing with some of these studies? I'm not clear on that.
Well, the two ministers asked the presidents of the three councils to consult this summer, and as part of that consultation, there was, as you know, there was a kind of a framework document that was kind of that laid out the kind of high-level parameters of what the organization would look like. It talked about many of the things that I spoke to in my opening remarks, but it also is asking for that input on, we talked about having a board. What should that board look like? We talked about having a CEO. What kind of characteristics should that CEO have? So
it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, and
No, thank you. That's very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we will turn to MP Blanchard-Jocard for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say hello to the witness. I have a question for Mr. Vatz. The federal government, back in October, an advisory board on the federal funding for research. A couple of months later, we heard from the report, which proposed the creation of this capstone. And one year and 3 months later, in June 2024, the government asked for public consultation. Could you explain today what happened between the time when the report was tabled in March 2023 and 15 months later when we had a launch for a public consultation process? Thank you for your question. I'm not perfectly fluent, so if I may, I would like to respond in English.
what I would say is that the report of the Bouchard report laid out, identified the issues and also laid out a proposed structure for responding to that. So there's a fair bit of work internally to determine how we could move forward with that. There was informal consultation with a range of organizations and groups to better understand the implications. And you'll note that the proposed structure that came out in the consultation document from ministers in 2023 was not exactly the same as what was put out by M. Bouchard and his colleagues. So there's a bit of work to kind of identify how to realize the objectives that had been laid out by the Bouchard panel in a way that we felt would be more effective. And the purpose of that next consultation is to provide more specificity on how the government would intend to respond and then seek the feedback of the community. So there are two elements of input. One is broad community input to an expert panel, and the next is the government proposing a model and then seeking their feedback and explaining why they didn't do exactly the same as what was recommended by the panel.
Merci, M. Vatz. Donc, ensuite, vous êtes abouti.
Thank you. That in June 2024, you officially asked the research ecosystem to give their opinion on the implementation of this new capstone. So there was 30 days for consulting the research ecosystem. So whereas you had 15 months in order to make a decision, but the scientific ecosystem had only 30 days. You've been working in the department for 5 years, Mr. Vatz. Can you tell me that this is a very significant organizational change, and it's the most significant change you've seen since you've joined this sector?
And I think I would agree it would have benefited from having a longer period of engagement. I don't think there's any question that we want to hear as many voices as possible. But I would say that in the interim period between, as I was saying, between the Bouchard report and the request to the councils, there was a fair bit of dialogue with at the ministerial level with officials to try and understand the community's responses to Bouchard. And then, having put out a proposed model, it was a validation to sort of say, does this model actually make sense? Now, the time constraint, I think we got over almost 120 responses in that period of time, so it wasn't a small consultation. I may just also add that.
C'est suffisant, M. Vatz, pour moi. Écoutez,
Pardon me. You in 30 days you had over 100 briefs. But you gave more time to the other parties. Could you please explain to me how is it that the Government of Canada that launched this public consultation process gave so little time? Well, so you've just said that this is one of the biggest structural changes that have taken place in the department, and you gave only 30 days for this consultation process. How could this happen? Some people got 60 days, some people had 3 months, other people had a month. So, and this was done in the middle of the summer. you were asking to consult the universities and the colleges and the CHIPs. They're shut down in the summer. Do you feel that this is responsible for a government who's conducting such changes that doesn't take into consideration the fact that the people who are supposed to be available for the consultation to actually participate, and that within 30 days you're going to have a real clear picture of what the scientific community is actually thinking?
The nature of the period of consultation, as I said, could have been longer, but you have to sort of distinguish the nature of the feedback you're going to get for different types of consultation. When you talk about wireless, you're talking about something where there's a direct impact on citizens, immediate impact on citizens. You want to make sure you're getting the voices of individual citizens on what that's going to mean for them in their pocketbooks. When you're talking about a structural change to these organizations, what you're really looking for, of course, individual researchers may have views, but those views are usually input through organizations, through institutions that have a greater capacity to provide feedback on a shorter time frame. And so I think you're getting a feedback from a community that's much better organized to be able to provide that input on a shorter period of time. So I don't think that we lost, I'm sure we lost some voices. It'll always happen. But I don't think it's comparable. I would also say, given the importance of the issue, the fact that we launched it in June didn't seem to cause an issue in terms of getting feedback. I mean, if it's important enough, academics will respond.
C'est votre point de vue, M. Vert, que je respecte, mais je vous confirme.
That's your opinion, but I received hundreds of emails from people who were not happy with the situation, and they were wondering why they only got 30 days, whereas other groups had more time. We know it's such a significant change, but I do appreciate what you have said, and that eventually you have said that we may have lost some voices along the way.
Now turn to MP Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for being with us today. I also want to welcome the Lieber Arrow Fellows. They're in the middle of the back over there. These are Canada's finest conservation scientists, postdoctoral fellows that are here in Ottawa to see how policy is made and things like that. So I wanted to welcome, and I also see other student groups here as well. So this is what we're here for, is to talk about the future of science in Canada. So we are hopefully doing a good job for them. I have so many questions. I'm going to start off with Mr. Vatz. Some of the concerns that I've read about in the sort of what we heard documents and other briefs, are concerns about, in this period of change, what will that look like? And they don't want things to go sideways. There's always the consideration of existing budgets. So first of all, let's talk about that. Will the existing budgets for the tri-councils kind of remain intact, and anything new that Capstone might want to fund sort of be on top of that? How is that going to work?
I think that a starting principle is that we're not looking to take from the councils in any significant way to support the implementation of the capstone. I can't say it'll be, it's still to be determined because we're still in the process of kind of working it through. I can't say it'll be dollar for dollar preserved, but it's not as though the intention is to take large amounts of money out of the councils or to reallocate money across the councils as part of this exercise. And it's acknowledged that if you want to do this well, you have to do it carefully. There may be some investments needed, but we want to do that in a way that doesn't compromise either the operations of the programs of the councils or their funding envelopes.
Yeah. And I guess another sort of major sort of high elevation question is how, we want to have this capstone idea came about because we wanted more collaboration across disciplines. So how will that actually work within the three different, we have three now. How will that change in terms of, from the viewpoint of an individual researcher? What would they see their opportunities, and just maybe walk me through how this will make things better? What do we see elsewhere in the world in other things that we're maybe trying to emulate? How will this improve all that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a range of these kinds of initiatives that have been going on internationally. In some cases, they've actually kind of collapsed structures down. In other cases, they've kind of created a structure similar to ours. The Fonds de Recherche de Québec also has something similar, as does the UK Research and Innovations. They moved in this way. What I think the most there'll be a number of changes over time. I would just want to start by saying that I don't expect programs to shift overnight. And I think what we need to do is actually talk to the researchers and talk to the consumers of that research and our international partners to help define how programs need to evolve to meet these needs. But to give you some examples of things that, from the recent past even, that you could have maybe addressed more effectively in this approach, take the example of research during the pandemic and how it could have it did support. Obviously, it was all science and research based, the kinds of interventions that were made, but if you're thinking about the kinds of problems that you're trying to deal with in developing new vaccines and therapeutics in terms of the public health actions, you're trying to bring together expertise from, primarily from the health science community. But if you want to talk about how you can actually get, community engagement to kind of protect the public, you need social sciences and humanities. And if you want to actually develop the capacities that you need to generate vaccines and therapeutics, you need engineers, you need people who are actually more in the natural sciences to bring that together. And there was no natural vehicle for doing that. It was in fact, we created a layer of new programs with new governance to be able to bring the councils together in CFI to have an integrated kind of approach to that. And it's that program is called the Canadian Biomanufacturing Research Fund and the associated infrastructure fund. And that's underway, but it took quite a while to actually spin it up. And it's a very heavy kind of structure to be able to respond to these kinds of issues. Now, that's an extreme example, but you could see other ways where there are issues that you want to deal with as a country, where there's kind of a societal question, there's a science question.
So if I can just jump in here and say, who picks those issues? We talk about mission-driven. Who chooses the missions? Who sets those priorities? Yeah. Is it the government? Is it the researchers? If we're in the pandemic, would a bunch of researchers get together and create a mission?
Well, I think there'll be different types of missions. Like there'll be some that are more akin to moonshots, for example. Like you could see sort of a technological objective you're trying to achieve. These are the kinds of initiatives that DARPA does in the U.S., for example, where you kind of have, achieve a certain milestone, and those may be kind of defined, through government strategies, through this new Council on Science and Innovation, which we're also standing up to provide expert advice on this. But there may be others where you're kind of bringing communities together to identify how to move forward. I mean, there are broad issues like poverty or housing, where there could actually be some technological solutions that you'd want to engage the community on and the experts on to be able to define how we're going to incentivize the right kinds of research directions.
We'll now start our second round of questions, our 5-minute round, and we'll start that out with MP Law.
Very much for coming here today. Mr. Vatz, the people that are doing the research in years, is it all the same ones that get the same amount of money or roughly this money every year? Is that because I've looked in some of the results and it looks like several researchers get money every year. Is that the case? Roughly speaking?
Well, I think the agency presidents may be able to speak to this better, but I think it does vary by agency. So if you take a natural science or engineering kind of researcher, their core funding is through a program called the Discovery Grants Program. The Discovery Grants Program is typically on a 5-year cycle, and it's and the amounts don't change. I mean, they're sort of set for the 5-year period. Someone reapplies. Typically, their money might go up somewhat or go down depending on their research performance, and that provides kind of core funding that they can rely on for their students to kind of pursue their research. But then the other things are layered on top. So there are more targeted programs of varying scales and different objectives that can change how much a researcher gets from year to year.
A lot in the opening up of this study and throughout the study is we need everybody to work together. Is that the position of the department, that nobody's working together? Because I go through all the results of the studies and everybody's working together from all over the world. But every time we have somebody coming in here, they're saying, we got to get these guys working together. So what is the case? Are we in the Stone Age here, or do we actually have researchers? Are we to believe that the researchers are working together or not working together?
I think researchers are very, they have a lot of ingenuity and they do collaborate. Like if they can, like that is core to advancing knowledge. But it's a question of, is it, knowledge in the purpose of a larger goal or not, right? Like, so the larger, there may be some initiatives that you want to move on that require a greater collective action than individual researchers can achieve on their own. And that's the kind of, there also, if I may, just one other thing that you can also have is there are some researchers who don't fit nicely into a discipline. Like they're actually kind of people who will say, am I a health researcher, or am I a natural science researcher, or am I a social science researcher? And they don't necessarily, those distinctions don't necessarily matter as much as the quality of the research.
A researcher that doesn't know what slot he fits in. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, a lot of these people have been getting money for 20 years, okay, different, but basically they've been getting it. Then they're also working around the world with different researchers. They're going to the same conferences. So they're already kind of doing it. And so I look at it and I'm like, is this a failure of bureaucracy, or is this some make-believe thing? Because I think the problems are right in front of your face and you don't need to create another layer of bureaucracy by chance. We just have to do this in a better system, possibly. I have one last question before my time's over. Well, I just want to get your thoughts, because you see on the American news, you see on the Canadian news, some of these studies that are getting approved. And they're for studies in other parts of the world. Like there's one here, population diversity and economic development in Mexico, some little place in Mexico. Why is a Canadian taxpayer paying for that? What value? I'm sure there's value to the person in Mexico, but what value is that? Is there because there's a list. There is a long list, I think, people in parts of our communities that say, why are we funding these? The health ones, that's a different story. I think there's great arguments to be made for the chances on those, but one like that, what is it? Where's the value that you're asking people to make on those?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is that the system is geared towards funding the best research projects, right? And I think it is a little bit, from my perspective, it's a little bit dangerous trying to narrow the scope of these things, because you don't necessarily know what the outcomes and the benefits to society would be. In the case of a study on communities in other countries,
studying Ukrainian Maiden Museum, okay?
I'm sorry, Ukrainian.
A Ukrainian Maiden Museum. I'm sure there's value somewhere, but why does the Canadian taxpayer have to pay for that? Why can't the Ukrainian government pay for it, or some wealthy Ukrainian person living in France pay for it? Why does some hardworking guy working overtime and can't see his kids have to pay for that?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to specific projects, but I mean, the examples you've given are about a better understanding of the situation in other countries, which...
Sincerity, just one quick question. Who do we have to get here that can answer that question? Because we've asked this question and they say, well, we have to trust this, we have to trust that. I wouldn't question this counselor, that one. Who has to come here that says, great value? Ukrainian Museum, Mexican migration patterns of porcupines. Who do we have to get in here to tell us that's good value?
I mean,
just a name. I'd take one.
I mean, this is just maybe a suggestion, is maybe you talk to the researchers. I mean, it's, they would be the ones who are best positioned to explain the impacts of their research. And,
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll now turn to MP Chen for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. And I also want to acknowledge the folks in the room, the postdocs, the researchers who are here, and in the committee room as part of this study, and thank you for their commitment to research, to knowledge production, especially in this age of information, and the increasing amount of misinformation and disinformation in the world. To have peer-reviewed studies and research in the spirit of knowledge production is truly important. I want to start off with a question to Mr. Vatz. Last month we had Chad Gaffield here. He's the CEO of the U15 group of Canadian research universities. He testified to this committee that the new capstone organization must continue to maintain political independence of funding decisions. This core commitment to academic freedom in the free pursuit of knowledge are not just foundational principles of Canada's research system, but are central components of its success. So in your opinion, how can the structure of a capstone organization balance the support for investigator-driven research and mission-driven research?
Thank you for the question. So, as we were just discussing, I mean, it's important that there be, that investigators' ideas, if they're, thought to meet a bar of excellence, there's the freedom to pursue those ideas, the knowledge that's generated, the training of young researchers, not just for the research community, but for society as a whole, I think is a really big benefit of that. And that's always done through a peer review process to ensure that you have the highest standard of research quality. When it comes to mission-oriented research, it may be that, as we were discussing, there are different ways to identify the priorities and what you're trying to focus on as a target. But if you want to get the best quality of research in support of those targets, you still need an assessment of the excellence of that research, right? So there's, in the case of something that's more mission-oriented, you could see it being in two parts. Like, what are we shooting at? Like, what's our target in terms of what we're trying to achieve? And then how do we ensure that we get the best quality of research that will support that goal? And that latter part is something where you want to have, that sort of independent review of excellence to make sure that that research can actually deliver. So that's how you can kind of do both with the same model.
The current system of the granting agencies allows them to really hone in and focus on the unique needs of their respective research communities. How should this new organization balance central oversight and as well maintain the autonomy of those respective communities?
The model that's being proposed is one where you wouldn't lose the individual domain-specific councils for that very reason, because there is an expertise and a knowledge and a community that can foster knowledge in those domain areas, and so that would be preserved in the structure, but that structure would also be tied to the goals of the organization as a whole. So the questions that you would then get are, how can we better leverage, for example, the health research community to address this broader objective, as in the case of the pandemic, or how can you engage social scientists to do so? So it is actually drawing on that expertise, but then having an accountability and a mandate to kind of bring it together around these larger challenges that we're trying to address.
So I'll turn over to Ms. Boudreau and actually ask about health research, because your focus has been for over 20 years in government, working focused on pharmacare, but also in the areas of mental health and substance abuse. You did mention in your testimony earlier around research focused on equity-seeking groups, Black, racialized, disability community, LGBTQ, and gender diverse, as well as Indigenous. And I believe there's an understanding that health research requires us to look at the different health outcomes of diverse groups to ensure health equity. So in terms of the need to focus and the lens you bring within health research, how can that be maintained or perhaps even strengthened with the creation of a new organization, of Capstone?
Thanks for the question, and I guess I would reply that with the two words that you've used, maintained and strengthened. So the importance there is maintaining that link of CIHR to the health portfolio, to the Minister of Health, and then also ensuring that the links of CIHR with other important health partners across the ecosystem are also strengthened. So that, I think it's that opportunity, those links with the health partners, universities, other academics, also maybe even just going into the communities as well. So it's those continued links and ensuring that those are maintained.
That's well over our time. Thank you. So now we are going to turn to MP Blanchette-Jonca for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je poursuis vers
Thank you. Mr. Vatz, I'd like to ask you, how do you think that these funding agents will enable us to improve the use of French in research?
I don't have specific mechanisms in mind. I mean, the councils, as you know, are making an effort in this regard now, and they'll be here for the second hour. I think what is really important is that we highlight this as an objective of the organization explicitly, because I think once you have a clear mandate to promote the use of French in research, then it becomes the accountability of the organization as a whole to achieve that. But in terms of the specific modalities, I don't have specific recommendations on it.
Parlant de mandat clair, Monsieur Vatz.
Speaking of clear mandates, the federal government announced in October 2024, just a month ago, that they will be creating an advisory board for scientific information in French. It was created by Heritage Canada rather than by the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Could you explain why your department is not included in this new initiative?
My group is actually engaged in that effort. It's being led out of Patrimoine, but it is something that we are actually drawing on as well and are participating in. I know our ministers' offices have discussed this as well. So I think it is being led by Canadian Heritage, but it's not uniquely a Canadian Heritage initiative.
Alors, rassurez-moi pour bien comprendre, parce que dans les communications...
I just want to make sure I understand. In the communications, they only talking about Heritage Canada, but there's no mention made of your department. So if we're talking about promoting and creating science in French, why is it that we do not even mention your presence as a department? So please explain to me, how is it that your role, what is your role in this advisory board?
Participating in the working group that's supporting that consultative process, and we intend to draw on the insights from
Est-ce que
that.
ça va être imbriqué aussi dans la nouvelle organisation?
Will this be indicated?
It's not a standing committee. It's a consultative committee that may not have a life beyond it, but I could see mechanisms like that being drawn upon to make sure that that is integrated in the organization, but that's still to be established.
Merci.
Button there. Okay, MP Cannings, the last 2.5 minutes for this panel.
Okay, well, thank you again. I'm just going to try to pick up where I left off, I think, about getting an idea of the roles, for instance, of the governing board of this new capstone body. And, you mentioned the Advisory Council on Science and Innovation, another new body. Just wondering if you could maybe explain for us what the difference is there, what the Advisory Council will be doing. Will it have some role in saying, hey, we should be putting more focus on AI or quantum or climate adaptation, and those become kind of some of the missions in this mission-driven structure? I guess I'm curious and maybe a bit concerned about how those missions might be drawn up and put forward.
The Council on Science and Innovation is meant to provide that higher level kind of strategic direction for the science enterprise as a whole. And it's important to remember, and as this committee knows, there are a large number of organizations beyond the councils and even this more integrated structure that are involved in science and supporting, science in terms of knowledge generation as well as the downstream impacts of science. So the idea with a council like that is it would draw on the insights of leaders in industry and academia and society to kind of set some of those broad directions, right? And those broad directions would then cascade down not only to the council, to the new capstone, but also to other organizations that are, that receive government funding or even that don't, to kind of give a bit more of a sense of direction in terms of where the country, as informed by, these experts, sees the opportunities and challenges that we need to be addressing. So it could be, this is still to be established as when the council has stood up, but yes, it could be priorities on the basis of some really strong input from knowledgeable people across Canadian society and maybe internationally as well. But it could also be more directionally around things like how we do better, how we collaborate better internationally, or how do we better support talent in this country. There could be other kind of thematics beyond just sort of research priorities that come out of that.
And very quickly, well, if we had a new pandemic, say, and we wanted scientists to gather together and come up with direction and ideas and research, how would that flow through Capstone into the research community?
If you had a health emergency, I think you need to ensure there's still a connection between the Minister of Health and the research community. For those kinds of special purposes, I think you'd want to make sure that you have the agility and the connection that you need to be able to mobilize research in a way that wouldn't take as long as a deliberative process.
So there would be, other sources of funding flowing in, you mean?
There could be. But I think the important thing is that, some of these urgent priorities for the country may be defined by governments as the needs arise, and you need to have a mechanism for doing that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of our witnesses, Nipun Vats, Michelle Brojo, for your testimony today and participating in the committee study. If you have any questions or anything further to add, you may submit that through the clerk. We're now going to suspend briefly to allow the witnesses to leave, and we'll prepare for our second panel. Just want to make sure of the witnesses. It's now my pleasure to welcome from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Dr. Tammy Clifford, the acting president, from the National Research Council of Canada, Ms. Maria Aubrey, Vice President, Business and Professional Services by video conference, and from Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, Dr. Alejandro Adem, President, and from Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, Dr. Ted Hewitt, President, and Normand Labrie, Vice President, Chair of the SRSR Board. So up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. Dr. Adem, I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As the president of the largest government funder of natural sciences and engineering research in Canada, and as the current chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, I am pleased to provide remarks concerning Capstone. The CRCC was pleased to have the opportunity to engage the research community on the government's vision for this new organization. Pendant un mois, nous avons tenu de nombreux.
Over 1 month, we held numerous engagement sessions and received 118 written submissions. Respondents voiced clear and consistent themes. These are captured in a report to the ministers, published and shared with you on October 16th.
They called for continued commitment to investigator-led fundamental research, which is where the vast majority of major breakthroughs and discoveries occur. They also articulated core values and essential strengths in the current system on which to build the new organization: academic freedom and peer review, equity, diversity, and inclusion in research, a commitment to research training and Indigenous research priorities, strong agency leadership with dedicated funding and reliable program delivery. Lastly, they called for sustained community engagement in design of the new organization and as part of its culture going forward. During the engagement process, we met with members of the NSERC Council and the standing committees, as well as NSERC leaders, a network of over 70 institutional representatives from universities across Canada. Leurs réflexions concordent avec ce que nous venons.
Consistent with the information I just highlighted, there was a focus on, again, the importance of fundamental research, how mission-driven research will be framed, the alignment of research and research infrastructure, the importance of guiding values and principles, and preserving disciplinary funding envelopes.
Particular interest in the new organization's relationships with industry. Through our grants, scholarships, and fellowships programs, NSERC is committed to developing talent, generating discoveries, and supporting innovation in pursuit of economic and social outcomes for Canadians. Let me leave you with a few facts about NSERC. Each year, NSERC funds over 11,000 researchers and provides direct support to more than 6,000 students and postdocs. These investments have impact. Since 2015, 3 researchers based in Canada have won Nobel Prizes in physics, one of the main disciplines supported by NSERC. More importantly, NSERC invested in all 3, including Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, the most recent Nobel winner. When NSERC began supporting his work in the early 1990s through its Discovery program, which is investigator-led, the concept of artificial neural networks was purely theoretical. In fact, it can take decades to build the foundations of new high-impact research areas such as AI. NSERC's early investments in AI research supported not only Jeff Hinton, but other leaders in the field, like Yoshua Bengio. In addition to decades of research, they have trained whole generations of AI experts. Consequently, Canada's AI research ecosystem has grown by leaps and bounds. Le financement du CRSR dans les universités.
NSERC funding at universities and colleges has supported the development of key world technologies in partnership with the private sector in areas such as AI, but also quantum science, biomedical engineering, clean energy, semiconductors, electric vehicles, agriculture, to name a few. NSERC's investments have real-life, real-time impacts on Canadian society.
This year, NSERC awarded Mehdi Sheikh-Zadeh, a chemical engineer and research administrator at Lambton College, with our prize recognizing partnerships. Origin Materials partnered with Sheikh-Zadeh and his team to optimize a pilot plant where they extract carbon from non-food biomass. The partnership was a success, and Origin opened a $140 million facility in Sarnia that employs 50 people to produce recyclable, carbon-negative, plant-based plastic bottles. Or we can talk about the remarkable achievements of Professor Jeff Dahn, lithium-ion battery pioneer at Dalhousie University.
This type of partnership with industry exemplifies our commitment to local innovation and supporting research that moves quickly to meet the needs of our partners.
Speak to you today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have, and I will be happy to share with you more examples of the research ANSWERC is funding, which is producing direct and tangible results for Canada and Canadians.
Thank you, Dr. Adem. Now, Dr. Hewitt, the floor is yours for an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Okay, merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci aux membres.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to be here as President of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, accompanied by the Chair of our Governing Council, Dr. Normand Labrie, and Rector of the University of Ontario Français. As you are no doubt aware, SRSR is a federal research funding agency that for the past half-century has supported research and research training in the social sciences, humanities at Canadian post-secondary institutions and other eligible research organizations.
And builds understanding of people and societies. Our community, made up of 70,000 post-secondary based researchers, graduate students, and postdoctoral researchers, examines the social, cultural, technological, environmental, economic, ethical dimensions of our past, present, and future. Their insights help explore our own humanity, better inform policy and decision-making, and drive innovation in Canada and beyond. In 2023 alone, we invested some $44 million on research addressing environmental and climate change issues, more than $34 million to research business and economic issues, $18 million to examine AI and cybersecurity, and over $14 million to help address the housing and homelessness crisis. Approximately 10% of our funding supports research undertaken by and with Canada's Indigenous peoples. All of these investments are guided by decision-making, led by expert review that is conducted at international standards and respected worldwide. Au SRSR, nous tirons une grande fierté.
At SRSR, we also take great pride in our solid track record administering tri-agency programs, including the well-known Canada Research Chairs Program, the New Frontiers in Research Fund, and the Canada Biomedical Research Fund, among several others. Our leading role in designing and implementing these programs has ensured all disciplines, including health, natural sciences, and engineering, and the social sciences and humanities, are supported and contributing to Canada's research enterprise. As the committee is aware, in June 2024, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry and the Minister of Health mandated the 3 federal research granting agencies to engage with members of Canada's broad research community to gather perspectives on the proposed Capstone Research Funding Organization and to report back their findings within a month. The agencies published a What We Heard report in mid-October.
Stakeholders welcomed the opportunity to provide input on the proposed Capstone organization and express an expectation in continuing to engage in the development process as it moves forward. What we heard from our community was that in shaping a new vision and structure, it's of critical importance that the value of social sciences and humanities research be recognized as a fundamental ingredient and leveraged to drive true interdisciplinary and mission-driven research. Just some of the unique elements SRSR and our community brings in this respect include a focus on human thought and behavior that drives innovation and helps society understand change and adapt to change, unique methodologies and approaches for conducting interdisciplinary research, expertise in engaging communities, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, as well as industry and civil society in research, and experience in supporting a robust research enterprise in French. En tant qu'organisme, le SRSR.
As an organization, SRSR welcomes the opportunities presented by the proposed capstone with respect to increasing harmonization of key programs and initiatives, breaking down silos, and facilitating a more coordinated approach to tackling the challenges that Canadians face. At the same time, we very much want to ensure that the contributions that SRSR has made in the past to innovative programming and support of partnerships within and beyond government interdisciplinarity, knowledge mobilization, equity and inclusion, support for smaller institutions, Indigenous research, French language research, and international collaboration are firmly recognized and embedded within a much larger consolidated corporate and financial entity of which SSHRC would form only a very limited part.
In the latter regard, we also strongly urge due consideration of the concerns brought forward by the Tri-Council, brought forward to the committee by the Tri-Council Indigenous Leadership Circle. As we look to the future of Canada's federal research ecosystem, the committee's engagement in matters related to the government's research modernization efforts is most welcome. As an organization serving Canada's largest community of academics and researchers, SSHRC is committed to this process and specifically to helping ensure that the social sciences and humanities research is well positioned to contribute to the renewed federal research support system and the outcomes we are all looking for it to produce in terms of enhanced economic and social well-being for Canadians. Both I and Dr. Labrie thank you for your attention and look forward to your questions and comments. Grand merci.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. And now we'll give the floor to Dr. Clifford. I invite you to make an opening statement of 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for this invitation to appear before you today to contribute to the committee's important work on the Capstone organization.
My remarks by informing your committee that on January 2nd of 2025, CIHR will welcome its new permanent president, Dr. Paul Hébert, a clinician scientist and health leader with extensive experience within Canada's health research ecosystem. Dr. Hébert is eager to start his new role and work with our partners to make the new Capstone organization a success for all Canadians. Madam Chair, over the last few months, CIHR has had the privilege of engaging closely with its federal partners, including our Tri-Council colleagues, Health Canada, and ISED, to articulate the foundational elements of the new Capstone organization, including those that will create opportunities for researchers to work on international, mission-driven, and interdisciplinary research. In addition, CIHR has also consulted with partners spanning Canada's health research community who have contributed invaluable feedback and insights to inform the creation of this new Capstone organization. Overall, the community expressed optimism that a Capstone organization will enhance coordination of initiatives among the granting councils, invest in critical areas of importance to the country, and provide a unified approach to international opportunities for Canadian researchers. The community also offered key considerations, values, and guiding principles upon which the modernization should take place. For example, ensuring academic freedom, research excellence, peer review, and domain-specific research. Another opportunity identified through our recent engagements has been to leverage the extensive experience and expertise of CIHR and of Canada's diverse health research community. In particular, the health community was pleased to learn that CIHR's institute model would be preserved within the new Capstone organization. For almost 25 years, CIHR's 13 scientific institutes, which are based at universities and health institutions across the country, have been leaders in their domains. They have excelled in delivering strategic research in response to the vast and ever-changing needs of Canadians. Our institutes also collaborate amongst themselves and with domestic and international partners in complex health areas that require an interdisciplinary approach, such as Indigenous health and non-communicable diseases. Within Capstone, the CIHR institutes will be poised to contribute their expertise and leverage their networks in exciting new ways. The health research community and our health partners at large have also spoken about the importance of maintaining CIHR's strong and direct linkages to the health portfolio, as was noted in the Budget 24 announcement. This ongoing interaction, as you heard from my colleague Ms. Boudreau earlier on, will no doubt ensure that health research continues to improve the health of Canadians into the future. This is a key consideration, particularly in light of the complex challenges facing Canadians, the need to be prepared to address health emergencies, and for the translation of research into actionable health solutions. CIHR's continued collaboration with health portfolio partners enables it to rapidly mobilize strategic research across many priorities in support of federal initiatives, as well as to generate evidence to inform policy and decision-making. This includes, for example, close collaboration with the Public Health Agency of Canada on the Pan-Canadian Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance, and also in support of research goals of Canada's National Dementia Research Strategy. We are pleased that the new capstone organization will preserve these vital linkages so that research continues to drive health system innovation and efficiency, and of course, better health for Canadians. Pour terminer, les IRSC demeurent.
In conclusion, Madam Chair, CIHR is encouraged by the feedback from the research community regarding the implementation of a capstone organization, one that builds on existing strengths, creates new opportunities, and provides the framework to continue addressing complex and multifaceted challenges facing Canada and Canadians. Thank you, and I look forward to answering the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clifford. And now for the final opening statement, we're going to turn to Ms. Aubrey. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. You're on mute right now, if you want to just take yourself off mute. There.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Perfect.
Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today on behalf of the National Research Council of Canada as part of this committee's study of the new capstone research funding organization announced in Budget 2024. J'aimerais commencer par souligner que les...
I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the NRC's activities take place across the country from the unceded current and traditional territories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We recognize our privilege to be able to conduct research on these lands, and we pay respect to the peoples who were here before us.
As Canada's largest federal research organization, the NRC advances scientific knowledge, supports business innovation, and provides science-based policy solutions. With facilities and collaborations nationwide, the NRC unites scientists, industry, academia, and global partners around Canada's challenges and opportunities. The NRC's current strategic priorities reflected in our recently released strategic plan are to advance research and innovation with the greatest impact to Canada and Canadians. Focused on climate change and sustainability, health and biomanufacturing, digital and quantum technologies, and supporting foundational research. In addition to conducting research, for more than 75 years, the NRC has provided key support to innovative Canadian small and medium-sized businesses through the NRC Industrial Research Assistance Program, or IRAP, to develop innovations that drive the growth of these businesses and Canada's economy. As announced in Budget 2024, a new capstone research funding organization will bring greater coordination and stronger connections among the tri-councils and the researchers they support. While it is not planned for the NRC to be formally part of this new organization, we have long-standing collaborations with the tri-councils through institutions like the Canada Research Coordination Committee, and will work with the new organization to maximize the impact of research funding. As Minister Champagne and Minister Holland indicated in their letter to my tri-agency colleagues on June 17, 2024, the new capstone organization will include key objectives such as supporting an internally collaborative, interdisciplinary, and mission-driven research. Au CNRC, nos programmes
At the NRC, our mission-oriented challenge programs will complement this objective. NRC challenge programs bring NRC research centers together with industry, academia, and international partners to bring focused effort in key priority areas. We engage with our partners and collaborators to advance high-risk, high-reward research on Canadian priorities.
our long-standing partnership with our Tri-Council partners, NSERC, SSHRC, and CIHR through the new capstone agency to advance scientific knowledge, innovation, and research excellence across disciplines in Canada. Madam Chair, thank you once again for the invitation to appear today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Aubrey. Okay, so I'd like to welcome MP Genuis to our committee today, and I understand that you will be taking the first round for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. I am very concerned about the rising problem of anti-Semitism on university campuses, and I do want to focus in this round on some of the potential linkages between that and questions on research funding. So just to put the problem in perspective, first of all, it's been reported that there were over 5,700 anti-Semitic incidents in Canada in 2023, and it is deeply troubling to see a substantial number of those incidents happening on university campuses. Very anti-Semitic statements made by certain groups, for example, as well as various incidents. So, and I wanted to ask, just in terms of research proposals, is it fair to say that you have a process where you would seek to screen out research proposals that promote racist or other discriminatory ideas or narratives, and would that apply to anti-Semitism as well? Maybe Dr. Hewitt is a logical place.
I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, we stand firmly against research that would be considered anti-Semitic or discriminatory in any way. All of our research is reviewed through panels that involve experts who read materials, provide input, and ultimately decide which projects will be recommended or not recommended. Beyond that, once these projects are funded, we rely on institutions to monitor the process of projects and how they're implemented locally, through ethics committees, through their own guidelines, through the laws of Canada and other rules and regulations as they exist there.
Okay, thank you. So would you say that you're confident that this process is screening out proposals that would promote anti-Semitic ideas or narratives?
I would say at the point where we're reviewing projects, yes, as much as we're able to do that, that does occur. But as individuals undertake projects or work in certain domains or move towards certain areas of research or collaborate, then of course issues can occur. And there are mechanisms for dealing with that, which I'm happy to tell you about as you move to your next question.
Okay. And we can come back to that. But I wanted to ask, in terms of what is anti-Semitism, do you use the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism, or would you use a different definition?
We do not screen, at the level of the councils for particular types of discrimination or otherwise. We're looking to see whether, in the view of peer review, those exist. I would say that other screening or other activities that would be taken at the level of institutions, you'd have to ask them exactly what constitutes that in their view, or how they apply the rules within their local institutions.
Okay. I am struggling a bit to understand your answer then, because on the one hand, you're saying you do try to screen out anti-Semitic or other racist content, but on the other hand, you don't have a specific definition of anti-Semitism. How do you screen out anti-Semitic content without having a definition that you're using for anti-Semitism?
So as I explained earlier, the screen that we use is peer review, so expert review, people who work in the same area, people who have the expertise to provide their views, their oversight, their considered opinion on the worth of the research and whether or not it crosses those boundaries. But should it cross those boundaries and somehow finds its way into the institution, then there is a whole other level of scrutiny that occurs at that institution, and measures that can be taken subject to the laws of Canada, local rules and regulations, or otherwise to deal with that.
Okay, so essentially then, and I'm trying to be fair to you and not put words in your mouth, right? There is a screening based on discrimination, but that screen is based on what other people already work in the field say it is, not based on some particular identifiable definition. That seems like a problem, because if you have sort of existing building concerns of certain narratives being broadly accepted in certain environments, then you might see more tolerance for certain kinds of discrimination than you would see for other kinds of discrimination. In other words, it's not based on an objective, definable criteria. It's just based on what other people happen to think.
So as an agency and as agencies, we follow the rules and guidelines of the Government of Canada. Absolutely.
It's just the Government of Canada has adopted the IHRA's definition. I have concerns about their implementation, but they have said they adopted it.
We would follow the rules and the guidelines of the Government of Canada and apply those to the best of our ability. But you're right, in the case of peer review, that review is undertaken by experts in the field, and they will have views and they will apply those views. And that's how peer review works.
You did say that you're applying Government of Canada policies. The Government of Canada says they've adopted the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism. So have they said to you that they want to see you use the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism, or have they not?
Not specifically, but there's generally speaking, we are looking for in peer review to make sure that these things are caught. But I'm saying also,
it's important to know what that definition is, because, and I'm running out of time, but B'nai B'rith has sent a submission in which they identify specific examples, and they are concerned that there are aspects of the narratives promoted by these examples that are violating anti-Semitism, and they're using IHRA's definition. So someone else might say they're not, but the definition we use and that the government says they've adopted is the IHRA's definition.
And there are mechanisms to review those projects to see if that is indeed the case, and they can be applied at the level of institutions.
Well, one mechanism might be for the government to be clear with you what it means that they've adopted this definition, because they say they've adopted this definition, but it just is pretty evident in their funding, and again evident today, that they're not actually insisting on that definition being the definition that's used.
So that's the time.
Okay, thank you.
We're now going to turn to MP Jazik for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. Dr. Hewitt, I'd like to start with you. As I understand it, you're the chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee.
No, sorry, that's incorrect.
Oh,
that's my colleague, Professor Adam.
Okay, well then we'll go to Dr. Adam. Dr. Adam, you are the chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee. It sounds very much like that committee was attempting to coordinate research. We are now looking at Capstone, which is to provide the same coordination, we understand. So, will Capstone replace the Canada Research Coordinating Committee? And if so, is it going to add some value? Because if there has been some attempt at coordination, why do we now need this new agency? Could you just clarify that for me?
Sure. So I think we should see this as an evolution of the ecosystem. So the Canada Research Coordinating Committee was created to start this coordination more organically between the agencies, and CFI is also a member, NRC, the Chief Science Advisor also sits on it. And it had some very specific goals to deliver on: early career researchers, EDI, indigenous research, etc., talent. And over the years, we have developed a suite of activities which I think really have helped pull together activities among the different councils. And for example, research security is an example of a theme that comes up a lot to CRCC, and we're working very hard all together to make sure that this is moved forward. There's also a program, a series of programs delivered under the supervision of the CRCC. It's called the New Frontiers in Research Program, and it delivers multidisciplinary projects, so across the three councils on areas of compelling interest. So it's kind of like a pilot for what we want to move to, you see? So then as we evolve to these larger scale interdisciplinary activities, the big scale international that our colleague Dr. Vats talked about, mission driven, etc. Then what we're doing, I think what the government is proposing is to move to the next level of integration, where we're not doing it sort of informally under a committee, but really as part of our job, and where there's a structure where above it is the strategic committee informing on the strategies for Canada, and then we get the very clear and crisp instructions to deliver in this interdisciplinary mode without, of course, debilitating the disciplinary verticals which will continue to exist.
So you see there is a definite benefit to the capstone organization as has been proposed.
I see great value. I'm a big enthusiast of it. And I know I'm a mathematician, so I like to work with examples. So look at the case of the UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. That is a consolidation of multiple councils which continue to exist. And there's also a nice study about what didn't go so well when they created that structure. That you might want to look at that review. And I've been to UK and spoken to their CEO as well as the heads of their different councils. And right now I think it's working quite well.
Now, we've also heard from Dr. Vats about the Council on Science and Innovation. Mm-hmm. And again, not being really familiar with what is already on the ground, is this already an organization that exists, or is it to be created as well?
Well, we used to have something called STIC, and it was never, it wasn't replaced. So I think this would be the new version of that. And would be people from all different walks of life, but universities, colleges, all the community, industry, very important. And they would develop strategies for Canada. I think the chief science advisor would be the co-chair. And I think they would be told to create a strategic plan. So we should not be developing strategy. We are deliverers, right? And we do this in the most efficient way possible. So I think that piece has been missing. In some sense, it might be the most important piece to inform the whole process.
So perhaps I'll turn to Ms. Aubrey now, because it struck me as we were hearing about the National Research Council of Canada that to a certain extent they perform a function that sounds on the surface a little similar to this new Council on Science and Innovation. So perhaps, Ms. Aubrey, you could just clarify for me some key differences as you see them between this new council or replacement council and the work of the National Research Council.
The National Research Council and its mandate is to do research and to develop technologies that can be put in the hands of those that can actually execute on them for the benefit of Canada and Canadians. And so our mandate goes beyond research. Now, to do that, we need to make sure that we engage all of the capabilities of the ecosystem and provide a way of convene the best players and the best minds and so on to provide that research and that technology. One of the things that we did starting in 2017 was to create what's called the Collaborative Science and Technology Program, which basically facilitates not NRC trying to do everything and basically trying to bring more money into the NRC, but rather to engage others and fund them so that we can get the best both in Canada and internationally if possible to provide solutions for Canada. And that could be done at the early stage of research or at the later stage where the technology research levels need to be closer to commercialization. So we are not really doing the same thing as the council, but rather we're complementary and engage with them and leverage.
That's our time, Ms. Aubrey. Perhaps you can elaborate in another question. Okay, we're now going to turn to MP Blanchard-Chilcot for 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to say hello to the witnesses. My first question is for Mr. Labrie. You are an expert in bilingualism and in humanities, and you're looking at the future of French in Canada. Could you explain the difference between research for the language with respect to by directing the Research Fund of Quebec? Given your vast experience and your engagement for Francophonie, how do you see the use of French in this scientific field, and what action is required to strengthen this element through this new research organization? Thank you very much for your question. That gives me an opportunity to deal with a question that is very important to me. Indeed, Canada operates in two official languages, French and English, two world languages. We want to produce knowledge in both languages. Unfortunately, the knowledge produced in French is less than that in English because of demographics and also the trend in science to whether we're dealing with engineering, science, it's normally done in English. And researchers tend to produce in English, publish in English. So it's today, with artificial intelligence, we produce AI. We use this to produce a lot of knowledge. And so if there is less knowledge produced in French, then we have less capacity when it comes to AI. So these are two international languages, French and English. So we have to really look at this. In terms of humanities, less is done in French because the researchers are engaged with communities. And in order to have an impact, the information needs to be communicated in French. In other sectors, the efforts must be made. And when it comes to Capstone, this organization which will be focusing on priorities established globally, French should be an important priority, and this should be reflected in the type of members that are sitting on the board, and this has to be reflected in the policies and in concrete measures to ensure that French has an important place in science. So this is important in all sectors. Thank you very much. Mr. Labrie, in the report that we heard about that was tabled in October, further to the public consultation with respect to Capstone, we talked about the fact that English is used in main publications. In parallel, Heritage Canada set up an external advisory board on scientific information in French, but apparently this is not a permanent group. Do you feel that this should be a permanent member permanent group in the future, and how do you feel that this will have an impact on the ecosystem in French? There are various stakeholders involved in this. Capstone is currently being developed, and other organizations as well, such as the NRC, the Canadian Institution of Scientific Institutions. There are other para-government organizations that are involved as well. In Capstone, there needs to be some permanence that when it comes to looking at the use of French in science, and since this goes beyond just the three funding organizations or agencies, the federal government and Canadian Heritage, or maybe any other departments, have to keep an eye on the priorities that are set when it comes to the dissemination of French knowledge. Thank you very much. And how do you see this occurring when these three funding agencies are put together under the Capstone? How do you think that this will have an impact on the French scientific research? Well, we do have programs for scientific reviews. There are programs for the mobilization of knowledge, the way that information is communicated. These programs need to be maintained and perhaps even expanded. Thank you very much. My next question is for Mr. Hewitt. Thank you for coming with us. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Do you believe that the fund managed by by the Department of Industry, Innovation and Social Economic. Do you feel that the Strategic Fund for Science, do you think that it needs to be managed by the new Capstone organization? Which organization? The Strategic Fund for Science. Scientific Strategic Fund. I don't know. That's not us. I understand. Are there any other people here who are aware of this element and could answer the question?
C'est bien.
Okay. So my next question is for Mr. Hewitt. I'll continue with you. We know that there's a lot of in SHRC. How do you feel that the capstone will increase the impact or help the use of French? This is so important. And we're going to participate actively in Capstone, this funding organization. We're going to use the same means that we use right now to do this, but we'll see. We're waiting for this capstone to get off the ground, and
now we'll turn to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for being here today. I think I'll start with Dr. Adem. You know, it's well known that Canada invests less in research and development than almost any G7 country, I think, except Italy, in terms of a percentage of GDP. And yet we produce, I would say, great science out of that. You could say that our scientists are very efficient, if you want to put it that way. And I'm just wondering if, you know, how Capstone is going to help this. Will there be an uplift of funding for the sort of coordinating projects that Capstone does, or will it simply allow us to do better science? I mean, you sort of touched on, you seem to be a fan of this. I'm still unclear in my mind exactly how Capstone will help the coordination role, the collaboration among scientists that we really need in many cases. And I could give examples, but you know them all. And so just help me here. How will this increase our impact in the scientific world?
Yes, well, thank you for that question. No, indeed, Canada really punches above its weight. It's not about the money you have, but what you do with it, I like to say. Now, the point here is that science is a very dynamic enterprise, and we have to modernize and keep up with most modern trends because, you know, there's a lot of competition out there. There are a lot of models, ways of doing science that we have to keep up with and which will really benefit our researchers. So I'll give you an example. One Health, this is quoted a lot. This is something where, you know, to deal with health threats, you don't really have to look at humans, you have to look at animals, right? So that is something which goes between CIHR and NSERC. Yet, for example, in the NSERC Act, researchers are not allowed to work on medical issues. So they're like legacies of things which fall between the cracks. So now the idea then is to take the expertise, the deep expertise from these disciplines and assemble them on teams to work on missions. Now, that does not necessarily mean that there has to be huge new investments. We can take funds which exist, like the New Frontiers in Research Fund, which is, I think, a prototype of this interdisciplinary tri-council work. We also have some very interesting tri-council programs that are already quite interdisciplinary and repurpose them for a modern view of science for the 21st century. Now, this will be in consultation with the community, and I want to stress that. We don't want, I call them know-it-alls in Ottawa, telling the community what programs they should be running, right? We have to consult with industry. What does industry want to see from our ecosystem? Where are the deliverables, right? And what kind of international partners do we want to have? Increasingly, research security is a very important, very key factor in everything that we do. So we really want to be working with like-minded partners. So I see great potential for really bursting out on these interdisciplinary mission-driven projects that are being contemplated.
Now, I heard you say just a few minutes ago that I think what you said was maybe you're talking about NSERC specifically, but maybe Capstone as well. You don't want to be the policy. You don't want to shape policy. You are the deliverers of policy. And, you know, so we have the basic research that should and hopefully will be done by researchers who are doing it on a purely, you know, curiosity-based approach. But with these missions, I keep coming back to this because people talk about this mission-driven approach. Who is deciding what missions they are? Is it the researchers themselves that band together to undertake a mission, or is it the government telling them what to do? Is it the new advisory council doing this?
I think the logic model is that the new advisory council would set a sort of a strategic plan, and then they flesh it out in particular missions which are relevant to the strength that Canada has and the different deliverables. And of course, you have things along the way that you want to do, right? And others that you want to do. You also have talent streams that have to feed into that. And I do want to mention here the big investment in talent that was done in this budget 2024, increasing the stipends for the students and the grants for the support of students. So this is very important. So you put all that picture together, and then I think you can unleash the real potential of all these researchers across areas. Now, if you have a mission, that means you can have universities, you can have colleges, you can have CEGEPs, you can have industry working on that mission. And so it has a way of kind of leveling the playing field, and we're getting the best from all the constituent parts of the ecosystem to face these challenges that Canada has.
So if the advisory council says this is one of our missions, do you envision funding streams coming from the government so that you can deliver it? How do you deliver that mission, or do you just get extra points when you're applying for a grant if you check off the mission box?
There are different kinds of missions. There's some, for example, that two councils could, for example, try to put some money in there to address them. If it's a very large mission, which is like an international mission that's very important, then I think we would make use of some of these tri-council funds which are there after they've been appropriately deployed. So, of course, we do not decide on funding. That is decided by you. So, but we're there to deliver, and I think we understand that concept as part of what the modern science has to do. The modern science has to be accountable, and it has to have an impact. And that will go all the way from the blue skies research to commercialization.
Thank you very much. So now for our second round for 5 minutes, MP Kitchen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. It's greatly appreciated. And with 4 of you here, for our groups, it's very hard to get questions in as quickly. So I'm going to try and do something fairly quickly here, and hopefully just first couple questions are going to be on yes or no type answers. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the role that you have, each of your organization, is to allocate funding based on the selection of funding should be based on individual merits of scholars applying for the research, and also greatly of basically the quality of the proposed research. Is that correct, Dr. Hewitt?
Yes, that is correct.
Dr. Adam?
Well, in addition, the training piece, which we call HQP, is the third factor that comes in the evaluation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Aubrey?
No, the National Research Council does not fund the students. We fund research, and we engage and hire students to work with us or work with collaboration. So ours is slightly different.
Thank you. The next question I'd have basically is, so each of your organizations is to promote collaborative, urgent, international, interdisciplinary research. Yes or no?
I would say in part. I mean, for the most part, we're funding research that is primarily discovery-based, or what we would call fundamental research. So that is, it follows where the researchers are moving in terms of issues that they find to be of importance to them, certainly, but to society generally. So that's how we get projects, and then we evaluate them in accordance with the mechanism that you were alluding to in your first question. We do participate and we do lead in the development of more mission-driven international and other themed research competitions and calls, often in collaboration with the other two agencies as well, because we offer not just one program, but a series of programs in competition that try and meet these needs.
Dr. Adam?
I would say all our programs have to be with natural sciences and engineering as a focus, because that's our mandate.
Dr. Clifford?
And similar to Dr. Adam, in the domain of health for CIHR.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Aubrey?
Yes, so long as it addresses priorities and benefit to Canada.
Great, thank you. So those are what your organizations are doing. And, you know, in your presentations, and I greatly appreciate it, and I just will quickly paraphrase basically what I heard. For example, from Dr. Adam, you talked about 11,000 researchers. To Dr. Hewitt, you talked about 70,000 researchers. And I suspect that Dr. Clifford and Ms. Aubrey, you could give me similar numbers. Those are huge amounts of researchers that we're looking to look at their research and come up with their funding. Now, the reality is, what I've heard from you, Dr. Adam, today is that you're the chair of a council that's overseeing all of these bodies. And from what I heard, which I wish we had had more time with you and I had you at the very beginning of this study, but what I'm hearing is that you're doing that role in your collaborations in discussions. So why would you want to have another organization that creates another bureaucracy to tell you to do what you are already doing?
Okay, so we are a committee, right? So we don't have that kind of authority you're talking about, or the budget. We have a tiny secretariat that runs it. I think the idea is to do this in a way which is, it's your job to work together. It's your job to deliver on these missions, not because this committee is putting you together to work together. So it's a natural evolution. And it's inspired, as I said again, by the UKRI model. So because there is confusion, and Dr. Vatz talked about it, when there's an international event and they come to Ottawa, they want to meet with all of us, right? And they say, well, in UKRI, there's a single person, the CEO, I know her, and she's the symbol of the organization. She deals with the higher government. She deals with all those issues. And then the verticals go deep into the science. And then when they're needed, they're brought up to work on these bigger issues. So, but the trick is to do this without creating an extra huge bureaucracy. I completely agree with you, kind of a light touch, and having this like a conductor for these councils, and with that interface with the government, which is very important, and that board will be critical, the board of directors, which is because it has to have true representativity.
Thank you. And to your point, the reality is the money that's going to be put out there to create this bureaucracy would much better be spent for the researchers such that you could determine, based on those facts we talked about earlier, of where that funding should be going. I think I only have very little bit of time left.
Yeah.
So I just... I am? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll turn to MP Longfield for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of you for being here. Because I feel like we have a mini capstone discussion going on because of your agencies. Dr. Adem, you mentioned mathematics, and that got my interest. I'm doing a master's program right now where we're using linear regression analysis in different ways. I was looking at it from manufacturing point of view, which was my background. What products are making the most profits? How do you determine that? What data do you need to capture? Another person in our class was looking at nursing. So Dr. Clifford, with what you've worked on biostatistics and epidemiology, there's some tie-in there. We're also looking at management and how do you inspire people to perform. And Dr. Hewitt, how do you create a culture of innovation and culture of trust using data? Is data the connecting link in this organization? And is that or one of the main connecting links? Maybe you speak on how would you work on a problem of trying to get people working on a complex problem that involves health and engineering and social sciences. Yeah, Dr. Adem.
Well, yes, absolutely. Data is at the bottom of everything, right? And how can you have an improvement if you don't know where you're at, right? And of course, there are issues of privacy, et cetera, and the quality of the data is key. And that's, of course, AI plays a big role in moving that data forward to get results. But ethically, right, we're very important where the social sciences come in and inform that. And in the health sciences, I was explaining to someone as to why AI is interdisciplinary, because the applications of AI to health are just monumental, right? So the data, you can simplify it. Your statement is true, but it has all these contexts and contours that have to be fleshed out. Governance.
Something that we will deal with in terms of policy if we can ever get our bills through the House of Commons, which is being stalled right now. Just a side comment, Dr. Hewitt, as we look at the social science, we've had the conservatives who are chirping right now, looking at different research projects and saying they shouldn't be funded, as if politicians would know whether they should or they shouldn't be funded. Could you talk about the importance of having the peer approach, but also how social innovation applies to other innovation?
Yeah, I think and I said this before in response to other questions, it's really hard to go by lists. You're looking at lists, you see titles, and you think, what is that? I think in the first instance, we have to understand, applications come in from researchers, they're reviewed carefully to make sure they meet international standard, they're funded on the basis of their quality, and a critical element of that is the benefit or the impact of that research. That is always taken into consideration. So I think, one piece of advice I think that Mr. Vatz had previously, it would be important to talk to the researchers themselves and ask them why this is important for them. And it will be important for them, and it will be important within a community of 70,000 researchers, at least some of them, and it will be important to some Canadians. I was telling you a story earlier, and in reference to the earlier comment about Mexico, I'm a student of Brazil. Nobody really wanted to know anything about Brazil at the time I was working, but all of a sudden we were in a trade fight and a trade war with Brazil, and Global Affairs is calling me as the resident expert, and I was subsequently appointed to a committee to help manage the relationship with Brazil when nobody cared. So you just never know.
All of a sudden an epidemic hits, so maybe I can go over to Dr. Clifford from a One Health perspective and looking at antimicrobial resistance, which I hope that our committee will pick up a study on at some point. The One Health approach and antimicrobial resistance being a key part of what humanity is facing right now as a risk. How do you keep on top of the epidemics that we are facing? Could you maybe talk about the importance of that in a big mission-driven discussion, please?
Thank you so much for the question. And, as the idea of Capstone first came about, people were wondering what might be a mission. And so many people would have pointed back to the COVID-19 pandemic when, as you heard, there were a number of mechanisms created at the time because we didn't have them. You've mentioned AMR. I think we've also heard about AI and its various uses. In terms of your specific question around One Health and AMR, certainly for CIHR, continuing to work strongly with our colleagues in the health portfolio, the Public Health Agency of Canada, again, being the lead for the plan on antimicrobial resistance. And I also want to mention as well that CIHR is the home of a Center for Research on Pandemic Preparedness and Health Emergencies. And again, that group has a steering committee. You spoke about governance that is linked in not only with federal partners, such as the Public Health Agency, CFIA, but also provincial and territorial individuals as well. It's not an easy thing to do these days, but there are those mechanisms. Thank you.
We're now going to turn to MP Blanchet-Choquot for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je poursuis vers Monsieur Labrie. Monsieur Labrie, comme...
Mr. Labrie, how could Capstone help you adapt strategies that are put forward by SHRC to promote the use of French, and how can they do this efficiently when it comes to the humanities and as well engineering? Thank you. The existing programs in SHRC, when it comes to scientific reviews that are funded, there are several of them in French. Connection programs, connections with the scientific community or with civil society or with industry or various partners. These are ways to promote the use of French in the protection and diffusion of knowledge when it comes to the humanities. In terms of Capstone, which will oversee 3 research sectors, I think similar approaches could be suggested so that there would be more scientific information produced in areas such as health and natural sciences. Thank you, Mr. Labrie. Mr. Hewitt, how do you intend to implement this new Capstone policy with do you have a specific plan, and what measures do you want to deal with? The plan is to work with the others to really go ahead and implement this Capstone, but we're going to follow their lead as to how we're going to proceed and when. It also depends on the government, on Parliament, that has to adopt the required legislation so that we can go ahead with this funding organization. Do you feel that we're ready to do this? We're prepared to work together with the government to set up this organization. And your team is ready? Yes. Mr. Adam? Yes, we're prepared. We're ready. Ms. Clifford, we're prepared. We're ready. Thank you very much.
It's a nice way to end that round. And MP Cannings, you have the final 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you. And I'm just going to continue with Dr. Adem. We've talked about, it's kind of a given that basic curiosity-driven research is important. When I talk to researchers, it's one of the things when I mention this Capstone idea, they go, well, I hope that is protected. And they want to make sure that the funding levels they have now are protected. And so it just comes back to this idea then of mission-driven projects. Will they, in the future, gradually eat away at the research funding envelope that the federal government provides, or will they be an additive thing? If I'm a researcher that decides to jump on some mission, will I be applying in the usual envelope, or is there going to be, or is this something that has to be worked out?
Well, I myself, as a scientist, the first thing I looked into was the assurance that the discovery research will remain where it's at and continue to thrive and continue to have successful examples of that of Professor Hinton, who publicly thanked ANSERC for the support when his work was very theoretical. So, but we give fairly small grants. So if people want to really mobilize their knowledge, then they're encouraged to go into partnerships, for example, with industry, through the Alliance program that we have, to apply to CIHR, to SHRC, to these interdisciplinary programs. So I think it's a real opportunity for our researchers in natural sciences and engineering, indeed across the 3 disciplines, to unleash their talents in this new kind of modern mission-driven. So I don't think we should be afraid of that term, right? It's not like a military mission. It's a mission to do something for society, to do something to help Canadians.
Yeah. No, I'm not afraid so much of the mission idea. It's
the name can be
the funding.
Yeah.
I'm just if the
well, I think we have to demonstrate
says,
impact, and we see it in all the councils around the world. They have to demonstrate impact to continue to be able to support the Blue Skies research. It's a circulation.
Time. Okay. I want to thank all of our witnesses, and I do want to thank all of the spectators that we had in the gallery today. It was so refreshing to see all our student researchers and the interest that you have in this very important capstone study and the testimony of our witnesses today. So thank you for joining us. And to our witnesses, if you have anything further to add, you may submit something further to the clerk. Thank you very much. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn?